Good morning. Today is Tuesday, September 20th. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. There are 6 cases on the agenda today. The first case we'll be hearing is RPC 1603603A at 1820 Fort Myer Drive. Mr. Grant Steinhauser is here representing the owner. You can start, Mr. Steinhauser, with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd also like to introduce Tim Primal, who's with Snell, who's owner of Ames Center LP. And I believe David Hanna is on as well, who is his counsel. So the property we have before you today is it's 3 separate RPCs that have just this year been combined into one economic unit by the county. It is the Ames Center, currently in a vacant office building in Roslyn, and just below are 2 parcels owned by the church, the Arlington Temple United Methodist Church. One is a gas station that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, sort of below the church, and then the actual church itself above it. Our appeal materials start on page 73 of 136 of the BOE memorandum. So let everyone sort of take a chance to flip down there. 2 major issues that we have to discuss today. One is the value. The value has nearly doubled from last year to this year. And that's obviously causing a huge issue with the prospects of this new development ever even getting off the ground. And the second issue is the allocation between the lots, and that we'll get into that second. But there was obviously the assessor looked at it and made sort of a revision. And that has actually caused even more issues than sort of where we originally started. So first we'll address the valuation. Again, this is a 100% vacant office building on the Ames Center lot, and then still an operating church and gas station on the southern, I guess you could call it, RPC. The assessor has switched to a valuation based on the site plan. So they've taken, a very basic, $86,000, per approved unit, multiplied it by the number of units, and then taken a rate, per buildable square foot on the very small commercial component that was also included in the site plan, and applied that. That's how they got to their $66.3 million number as the original assessment. And the revised assessment reflects a slightly revised site plan where I believe there are something like 12 less units than in the original. We don't believe that this approach to value takes into account any of the necessary costs that it will take to actually get to the ground. Of which there are a number, and not only that, this is specifically evidenced by the fact that this owner has tried, to bring in a partner at a specific land basis to get this project going. It was originally put out there it was marketed by, I believe it was a Newmark. By Newmark at a $60 million land value to over 150 different institutional investors, of which they got 0 bites. They then lowered it to $50 million land basis, 0 bites, to the point where they've been told they would need to lower the land value to between 15 and 20 million for this project to be feasible. So we have very specific evidence that getting to the land, the value could not be higher than 20 million. Otherwise, they will not be able to build the project, which There are all sorts of costs, including obviously demoing the existing structure, um, but we're also talking about a number of cash commitments to a variety of different projects that are required within the site plan. We're talking about $12 million to construct a public plaza on 18th Street corridor. We're talking about future maintenance of that plaza. We're talking about paying the gas station, to go dark for 42 months. We're talking about rebuilding the church, within the project. These costs are well over $30 million. And while the assessor's sort of generic, approach to these, developments is to sort of just, slap that, $86,000 per unit value on, on any new, approved site plan in Arlington. Ours is unique, and it really just doesn't work here at all. So we took two approaches to value. This can be seen on page 79 of 136. This is an office income approach, a very standard valuation. This is how the Ames Center had been valued up until this year. You can see we took a market rent of $36.50 per square foot. We subtracted 6% out of that for concessions per county guidelines. We took the miscellaneous income and parking income from 2021, as there still was, income at the office in 2021 until ultimately by 1/1/22, the last tenant was gone. We took the 25% largest vacancy and collection loss, $8 per square foot in TIs. We capitalized it at the assessor's 7.15% cap rate. And then we just followed the standard model for lease-up costs, per the county guidelines again.
Hey, Grant. Sorry to interrupt your flow. I just want to make sure I have like 20 seconds at the end to say something. I don't know how much time is left.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah. And how about in 30 seconds? We're gonna pivot to you.
Okay.
So that's how we get to an office value of $28,350,000. And then we just add, previously the gas station has always been assessed at $1,149,900, and the church has always been assessed at $3,091,800. I assume those were based on cost approaches, but if you look historically at those two RPCs, that's what they've always been. So we added those figures back, and that's how we get to a number of $32,592,000. We've also done a cost approach to value, which actually came in at a lower value. So that's why that's the number that we're putting forward today. But I want to make sure Tim has a chance to talk here. So Tim, can you tell us a little bit more about this project and what's been going on?
Sure. Staff has assessed this as if it's already a closed project. We already have a deal with the church, and that's not the case. We haven't purchased the density from the church yet. So what we own is our vacant office building. The church still owns the church and the gas station. And like Grant said, the project's not economically viable today, and we won't close our deal with the church until that changes. And so, right now, between the financial markets and the construction markets, like Grant said, the project just doesn't pencil. So again, what staff has done is assessed the Ames parcel with all of the burden of this approved site plan, although we don't own the benefit of that yet.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Grant. Good morning, Tim. We are, of course, talking about Ames Center site plan redevelopment. As the board is familiar, that's essentially very straightforward, and in fact, as Grant has already outlaid, there's really only three ways the county is going to value property. If it is income producing, we will value that via the income approach to value, capitalization, direct capitalization. If there's a site plan that's been requested, a special exception site plan that's been put before the county board and approved, that will take precedence in case it will be valued via site plan. Once the site plan, the ground foot permit has been issued and construction has started vis-a-vis either demo of the existing condition or construction of the new approved development, it will then switch to cost approach. So as noted, this project was approved January 2021 for approximately, I think it was 740 units. It was amended in July of that same year, as Grant noted, to reduce the number of units, as well as reduce some of the what they're calling convertible space, essentially mixed retail office space. Some various changes to exterior facade, parking, etc., exclusion densities, whatnot. Just being blunt, we do not make adjustments to the site plans that are approved by the board. In regards to the items listed that are felt needed to make this plan come to fruition, we would point out that essentially these are items that either the county asked for to achieve this 3.8, 4.8 density or extensions of that density, increased density. And that would be through those some of those items that were listed. Increased contributions to AHIF, increased units, committed affordable units, the public facade. And I can't quite quote that 100% particularly, but I'm fairly sure that the language in there states that the developer, the sole cost of these developments and upkeep is at the sole cost of the developer. So essentially passing it back on to the county to give a discount for the approved density, it gets kind of meta because you're essentially asking for a discount of the things that you needed in place to get the density approved. We make that very easy. We don't offer any reductions or adjustments to the site plan that is approved. Again, it's very much straightforward, as Grant pointed out. $86,000 per approved unit, and I believe we were at $55 or thereabouts for the per square foot rate for the retail. Again, in regards to, we don't want to come off as argumentative. Obviously, each project has its own particulars. We would point out, again, this is not confidential information. This is public record. So as far as how these values are put forth, every project that is currently valued as a site plan is valued the same way in regards to number of units times that year's land rate, and again, per square foot rates. I would also note that I took a look at the county's what they call corridor development report, which essentially is looking at what's currently under construction. And there's a number of things under construction and similar projects, if you will. Next door is Roslyn Holiday Inn, which the board may be aware about. That's another site plan that's being built currently. That's going to be essentially 3 components where you're going to have apartments, a hotel, conference, or office space. JBG alone is building 2 sets of twin towers in National Land in Crystal City. We have Ballston Harris Teeter site right next to you guys on the what's called the courthouse block. There's a mixed-use project that's coming and being built as we speak. So the particulars of why this project can't get on the ground, that's one thing we don't get into with ad valorem mass appraisal valuation. The particulars of development agreements between them and the church, we don't get into. Payments to a gas station to remain closed, we don't get into. We value this the same way we valued other approved site plans that are active, and we believe that this one should be confirmed as well. We do ask you to recognize the revision that was made to note the amendment from July, which was a bit of a decrease in units and the convertible space. That being said, we do ask the county board members to approve the county's revision to $65,432,600. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. This is for Snell. Have you filed any construction drawings or site plans or anything after approval of the 4.1?
We have filed for permits, yes.
Okay, and does the 4.1 site plan have an expiration?
It does.
And when is that?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I think they're typically good for 3 years and then an extension.
I believe it runs through the end of 2026.
quick question for the county. The applicant filed an appeal based on the assumption that that we should do it based upon it being office as income. You didn't do a workup of that though, did you?
No, sir. Yeah, once that site plan was approved in January and then amended in July, that subsequent January 1, we switched to site plan.
That's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Matzkin, you had your hand up?
I do. The only unusual part about this I find is that the appellant apparently doesn't own all of the land. They have, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a site plan approval for all the land, but you don't own all the land
That's correct.
yet. I mean, subject to rational stuff. What percentage of the, because we're talking about FAR here, you know, it's based on square footage of raw land. When it becomes raw land, what percentage do you own now? What percentage don't you own now?
It's a good question. If you could give me 1 minute, I can look that up.
Yeah,
Unless Grant knows it off the top of his head.
the calculation can be seen on page 78 of 136 in our of the BOE memorandum. But the Snell lot, the Ames Center lot, is approximately 79% of the total, or 62,378 square feet. The church owns 16,293 square feet, or approximately 20.71%.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, and a follow-up to that for the county. Mr. Chikas, are there other appellants that would own portions of site plans that are assessed the same way? I mean, I'm just looking from an equalization standpoint.
Repeat the question, Ms. Chairman.
Well, are there other, site plan approvals where, like in this situation, they don't own 100% of the land?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. Other questions from board members? No? Oh, yep, Mr. Matzkin.
One more, maybe I should know this. The church owned this is supposed to be my original question. Who did Snell buy and is in process of buying the land from? Is it entirely the church?
Yes.
They own
The church, they own everything. So they have two parcels. One is for profit, which is the gas station, which is a tenant of the church. And their second parcel is non-profit, which is the church itself. But they own the entire land parcel that sits on those two RPCs sit on.
This has never come before. I thought, as a layman, not as a real estate professional, churches and other similar institutions don't pay real estate taxes.
They don't. You're right.
Okay.
On the church.
On the church. So at
They
least
sit the RPC. Yeah.
correct.
Just the church, but they pay it on the land. Is that what you're saying?
On the gas station.
Yeah. Well,
If you think about it like a condominium, they pay tax on the RPC that is allocated to the gas station
yeah.
piece. They do not pay tax on the part that is allocated to the church piece.
Right now, what they own is the gas station RPC and the church RPC.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so what is, and we know what the gas station RPC tax is because we have it on the front page.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was reading the comments from Newmark's offering and a lot of stuff related to too many units. I mean, could the appellant speak to that? Is there any way to phase this thing and deliver it in smaller chunks, or is it 732 units, bam, delivered all together and trying to absorb in the market?
Sir, you should come work with us. That's a great idea. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out at the moment. The current plan is to try to phase the projects, and if we do that, we'll still likely have to close with the church at some point before that happens. But the idea would be to build one of the two towers because it is less units. It's easier to stabilize when you have 400 units instead of 750 units or whatever the numbers are. And so, the time frames are shorter, returns are higher, and makes it more viable.
Thanks. One more question
Go
for
ahead.
Mr. Chikas. we get this 86,000 per unit guideline every year, and I don't think it's changed in the last 3 or 4 years. But I don't have the study that it came from. So I'm just curious, are there any other kind of mega developments where there's 700-800 units that are feeding into that study, or is everything kind of the 100 to 300 units? I mean, just kind of where's that data coming from?
Sure. Yeah. Essentially, it is from projects that are already approved and purchased. So when you do the math backwards of the purchase price for the approved units, usually we're up in the area of 100, 200,000 per unit. So the 86,000 per unit is actually quite low. In regards to your first part, are there other properties that are going up that many units? Yes. Again, we mentioned JBG's water tower, or whatever they're calling it now, has 2 units, approximately 800, 2 towers, approximately 800 units. And then about a half a block away in Crystal Drive, the similar deal, another 2 towers of 732 units. So this is not that unusual. Again, Roslyn, the Holiday Inn Roslyn is technically 2 towers. One will be a hotel, one will be an apartment. There will be 2 new towers at the Marriott Roslyn site, one being a condo, one being an apartment. So it tends to be, we're seeing almost like a return on investment where they're actually building more units on smaller lots, either through these improved densities or the new sector plans put out by the board to encourage this type of use.
Could I rebut that just for 1 second? So there's a difference between JBG and Snell Properties. JBG is a huge REIT. Snell Properties is a family-owned business that has owned this land since the 60s. Our return profiles are completely different than a huge REIT. And as it goes to Ditmar, yes, they're also a family office. However, they started their project, I think 18 months or 24 months ago. So they were, demolishing their building long before the current economic conditions happened.
Okay.
And then I'll just say one more thing. This project could stay like this literally for years until things change, right? And again, we don't own the whole project. We only own currently we own our vacant office building. That's all we own.
Okay, thank you. Final questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
What is the church's RPC? We have 4 listed, or all 3 ones a total. Which one specifically is the church? Mr. Cheekus?
The church is 006. The gas station is 004.
Right, yeah, that one I knew.
Ames Center is 002.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right, any final questions? No? Mr. Cheekus, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, ma'am. It's, we don't want to sound argumentative, but it's seeming like the cart was put before the horse. If the development deal was not set in place, I don't know why they spent the money and the time they did on getting this property approved and then amended for that matter. So this property has not only been site plan approved, it's been amended 6 months after that date, 7 months after that date. If they're looking at as far as the project not being able to get off the ground, I'd recommend either pulling that amendment or revising it heavily, because obviously once that site plan is approved, it will stay in place until it either expires or it switches to cost approach. Given that we are valuing this property exactly like other site plans that are approved by the county board, there is special exception. We do believe that this property should be approved at its revised value of $65,432,600. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steinhauser, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yeah, thanks. The one issue we really didn't have time to touch on, and frankly, we could have an entire second case about it, is the allocation. If you look at the column 2022 original on page 1 and then 2022 proposed, the assessor has completely moved all of the allocated value. It was originally spread out across the 3 RPCs, and they've moved 98% of it or so to the Ames Center lot. This is a result of the owners in good faith going to the assessor about a month ago and saying, hey, you've allocated too much to the gas station here. They were double counting the land that the church owned, and they said, it should be lowered and some of the value should be rebalanced. Unfortunately, what has since happened is the assessor has taken all of the density and put it on the Ames Center lot. So the density that they don't even have access to until they've completed a purchase of the church is now entirely on the 002 lot owned by Ames Center. So that is a significant issue. And the second, obviously, the valuation.
Need you to wrap up.
Okay, they're just trying to get off the ground here. It would like to be assessed fairly until they start building. And then, of course, this is going to be a cash cow for the county. We're talking about a 700-unit apartment building. But up until then, I mean, just let them get started.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It's just among the board members now. Where is everybody? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and throw out some thinking and see what others think. Originally, I was thinking maybe we should just go back to where it was in 21. But the fact is that the owner is pursuing development. They're filing plans, which are not inexpensive. And so obviously they don't think it's worth as little as is being claimed here this morning. Yet on the other hand, they do not own density that they're being taxed for. And I guess my thinking is that, I don't think we can get into all the cost of bringing this project online. But I do think we can certainly allocate the appropriate amount of density to Snell, because it's not uncommon to have a site plan over several owned properties. And each property has contributed the amount of density based upon their area. And you can't just say, well, this is the biggest property owner, or this was the applicant, therefore, if we charge all the density to them, it's got to be allocated to each parcel. So I think a reduction is appropriate based upon the percentage of density that Snell actually owns. That's where I am.
Okay. Other folks? Mr. Matzkin.
On that specifically, it's another way to say it that you would exempt the church-owned density?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were assessed a little over $1 million last year and a little over 11 million this year. So the difference is a little over 10 million. Reduce that from the proposed total amount, and that makes sense to you.
Yeah, and also, Ken, what I did is I took the 65,432 and multiplied it by 0.79. So I think you could do it the way you suggested, or just.
So it's easy to lie with mathematics. Unintentionally lie with mathematics. I'd be interested to see what it comes out. Okay.
21%.
Okay. Other folks?
Isn't that what they said?
Yeah, yes.
Mr. Yates.
No, that's what I was getting at, wasn't going to go to was how do we break it down, but I think you came up with a good example in there. I think that makes a lot of sense.
The RPC specifically to the church, not church-owned land, because the gas station is a taxable
It's like air
property.
Right.
Yeah, but it's ground rights. Yeah, that's right. It's upside down air rights. What else?
Where I was, Ken, I'm at 51,691, 800.
But that includes, that 21%, 79% is, includes the gas station. And I was thinking we should only include the church that isn't taxable. I don't know why these guys should pay tax on property they don't own. I understand it's an economic unit, site plans, but in this case, to me, that's the unique aspect. Demoing it and paying the gas station to go dark is not unique, but this is unique.
Right. And that's not germane to it anyway.
And we can't get into the breakdown of those
Right.
numbers. The county has their
Yeah.
guidelines and what they're doing.
Yeah,
They just didn't
reasonable.
apply it quite for this church.
Ken, what percent of the density does Snell have? I thought it was 79, am I
No.
wrong?
Oh, yeah, well, I guess what we have to do then is run regular numbers for the gas station. That's right, well said.
All right, well, let's let you run your numbers and let's hear from the other board members. Mr. Hoffman or Mr. Penaranda?
Just take it out to 21.
Mr. Penaranda.
Well, I originally thought that the county is correcting what they did. They normally will assess based on the site plan, regardless of who pays the tax bill. There are 3 parcels here, but I don't think our job is to worry about who's going to be paying the tax bill and who's not. In my opinion, it was assessed based on the site plan, which has been done for many years. And, I don't see anything wrong with what Mr. Chicas did.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's due for a reduction. I could go along with what looks to be a consensus here. And just to say that 86,000 a unit, you take that, and it's not that difficult to apply an extraordinary circumstance, which sometimes you have. You got buildings that sit on rock that need to go underground. We usually end up in that discussion, and I kind of side with it costs more to develop different sites. It's contaminated land, whatever it is. This one obviously has a lot of proffers, a lot of public space improvements, which I think should be factored into it. And really the biggest issue is the unit count, and there's evidence in the package from dozens of capital partners that have said there's too many units, it's too much supply, and next year we're going to have another argument in front of the board, and it's probably due for another reduction because delivering 732 units in higher interest rate environment, when it's going to take you 4 or 5 years to absorb all those units, maybe even more, it's probably not viable, and we're going to end up looking at this as an office site again. But I'm okay with kind of in the middle.
Let's say phase. For
1 year, and we'll see. Yeah, if they figure it out in the next year and get things going, then we'll be looking at it as a development site.
Right. My only concern on that is, as we've heard from other, cases before, I mean, there's a site plan on it, like Mr. Penaranda said, and it's assessed on the site plan. I do believe that it's not allocated properly between all the entities, but I'm not sure from this standpoint, how we go about reallocating, because it's going to be increasing the amount to somebody. So I just don't think that we can turn and arbitrarily say, oh, we're going to just reduce the whole thing. I think the county in good faith does have it misappropriated between, the 4 parcels or the 3 parcels. But I'm not sure. I'm not really comfortable just saying, oh, we're going to just reduce it, because there is, in fact, a site plan in place. And we've heard from other folks where they've said, oh, well, it doesn't seem like it's feasible. Nonetheless, it is approved. They could still sell it. They could do, several things with it. So I'm a little apprehensive with just reducing it, just for the fact that, it may not pan out as planned. I think the allocation is an issue, but I'm not necessarily on board with lowering it just for the sake of lowering it. Mr. Yates.
So Mary, you're saying that the allocation, if we reallocated it, the same amount should be moved over to the unit count for Snell, not taking it off of the other parcel. It's just moving the numbers. It's not changing the numbers.
Correct. That's where I would lean.
So you're
Go ahead, Mr.
feeling confident that because they have a site plan for land they don't own, they need to pay the calculated rate for that FAR on that part that they don't own.
Someone's got to pay it.
Right. The site plan for this economic unit, is valued at the 65,432,600. I mean, that I'm not disputing, and I don't think that it's in our purview to say, oh, well, there's other, factors out there, so this isn't worth as much. The bottom line is, from a standpoint of equalization, when there's a site plan put on a parcel of property, whether it's an economic unit or an individual, RPC number, it's based on the site plan. No negotiating, no anything. If you want to go back and amend the site plan, then you can amend the site plan and it can be reassessed in future years. So from my standpoint, the 65 million, I'm fine with, but I would be open to looking at reallocating it if we can.
I didn't quite understand.
There's no value.
So it's up to this appellant to get money from the owner that creates a portion of the 65 million tax bill, if they choose to. It's not the rest of the Arlington County taxpayers to support it. I'm trying to reorient my thinking here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to alter the assessed value of a parcel that did an appeal and isn't in front of us?
We did appeal all parcels, and we do have LOAs from both owners, so I just wanted to point that out.
So all parcels are in front of us?
Yes.
That was my assumption.
Yeah.
I don't think it's gonna gain anything. I mean,
No.
yeah, the number's the number. We're just moving to where
Yeah.
how it breaks
Yeah.
down.
Oh, I agree with that.
Well, then the balance between 51 and 65 ought to go to the gas station and church.
Yeah.
If they can pull it off, but that's not our mission, it's their mission.
Why is it not our mission?
Because we're just throwing it up, because this is an economic unit that we're taxing and not ownership. Again, I'd started from we're taxing ownership, but
Yeah, I don't
my
think
colleagues are saying that's not what we're doing.
I don't think it has anything to do as far as who owns what percentage of anything, to be honest. I think it's valued on the
But what if the
site
county?
plan, on the site plan itself. And if you look at the majority of the investors that they rejected the offers, it's because of the ground lease, not for anything else. It's, look at the list, most of them don't like the idea of the ground lease.
So, but if we don't change it, and the county says, well, we just, we heard what you said, but we choose to ignore you, then the property owner is screwed, aren't they?
The bottom line comes out the same.
Right.
If we're just reallocating it, and then you go to the church that owns the other two parcels.
But the church says no. I mean, how can Snell go to another property owner that owns their own property and say, hey, you owe me, some money because I overpaid tax because of the way the county chose to allocate it amongst the economic unit?
Well, he said that they've had the right, and they have the right to, and they've appealed for all three.
Right.
It's one economic unit. Well,
Yeah,
again,
as one unit.
I see the church and the gas station land both assessed at over $11 million.
Right.
I don't see where the misallocation is. Never understood that. But even if we change the numbers, the bottom line's the bottom line. So I didn't pursue it.
Yeah.
To me, it's.
They were
It's
originally assessed at $1 million. The assessor lowered it.
Mr. Steinhauser, it's just among the board members now.
It's a mistake
sorry.
of fact, though.
I'm sorry.
So Ken, you're saying.
You got the wrong column.
To original.
Well, I thought 2022 and in 2021, the gas station and the according to this.
Yeah.
And the church paid a total of about $2 million in taxes. Okay, then this year they ought to pay that same amount. Can't imagine anything changed. The empty office building is a site plan, there's no question. The county has calculated it correctly. So I just subtracted, the residual between the 22 proposed for gas station and church, subtracted what they indeed paid for 2021 for those two, and then got a bottom line figure and subtracted it all from 65 million plus and got 54 million, just over 54 million. I don't see anything wrong with the 79% you did. I just came out with a different number.
54 on 002.
Your 79% suggests that the
Yeah.
gas station and the church generate no real estate tax. And in
Yeah.
2021, they did. So they should continue to pay it because nothing's changed for them. They still own it and they're still using it as such.
But 2021 was before the site plan.
Yes, exactly. And they still.
Right, I have a question.
But Mary,
Just-
you're saying, no, Mary,
I'm sorry?
We're assessing a site plan and not ownership of who owns what and what they do. And that seems reasonable to me. So I'm thinking, they both seem reasonable to me.
And they got kind of flipped a little
Right,
bit.
so let me just ask the board members, if you look at on page 1, on 2021, you've got a total from parcel ending 004, which is the gas, and 006, which is the church. You've got a total of 1.149, correct? Because there was nothing for the church. Are we in agreement there?
Yes.
Okay, so when you look at the proposed amount, then you're looking at, I don't know how they put $1 million over on the church, but they put $1 million over on the church and 475. I mean, it's actually within striking distance of the 1.1, it's 1.5. I mean, and the balance of it unfortunately goes to 002. I don't see how else we can allocate it.
I think you allocate it based on density yield. If you're gonna tax the site plan, then each parcel has to be taxed based on the density that parcel yielded. Normally, you would take the area and do it, but here we have air rights, so it's more difficult.
Right, I understand that, but the church isn't going to pick up anything.
Yes.
So, I mean, the only option is to put a portion of the total onto 004.
Which is not much.
Mary, would it make sense for us, the board, to say, we don't think this has been allocated right, and affirm the assessed value of $65,432,000 and suggest that the staff look at a reallocation period, and that be how we conclude this today?
I don't know, Mr. Dubai, what do you think of that? Derek?
I mean, that's if you make a decision to confirm the value today, that's the only firm decision that's going to be made. It doesn't have anything to do with allocation. It's something that we can continue to consider going into next year, but what you're looking at is the value for this year.
Right, I understand that, but I mean, and without getting into, because I'm really not opening this up to questions, but can you not, based on listening to the testimony, see where we think it is misallocated?
I mean, we hear that, but we have a differing opinion on that right now.
Okay, all right, enough said, then apparently you don't agree with us, but okay. All right, so I guess in answer to your question, Mr. Lawson, that would be no.
Yeah, I guess.
You could just go back to last year where the allocation was correct.
But last year's assessment was based on it's an office.
Yeah, that's before
I
the,
don't think it's to do it.
and that's throwing the whole thing of it out.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I think we have to go with the bottom line as it's stated. I totally understand what they're saying. But
Then why don't we go with 2022 original?
they need to get back to amending this.
Amending ain't gonna properly allocate the density though, and the tax burden.
Well, it could, and especially if they're talking about phasing it. That's a lot to ask, but that's really what's going to make any change on here.
Wouldn't the tax burden be based on the ground-based payment to the church? Just their economic value of their parcel?
Probably. Yeah.
Which we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
We can't do the allocation because we don't have the information to do it. I mean, we could defer it and then try to figure it out for next meeting.
The bottom line's still the bottom line.
Yeah,
Right, the bottom line is the bottom line.
Comes down to 86,000. Just
No, I guess you gotta go with the site plan valuation. And
You
if
do.
they can get money from the church for the taxes that would have gone under normal circumstances, because for the gas station that the church still owns, then, but no, it's the site plan rules.
It's the site plan. Despite demo and whatever else
No,
they got.
everybody demos, everybody
Yeah.
pays tenants,
The money
everybody.
associated with the site plan is not germane to this.
Yeah, none of
All
that,
right.
none of that, that's all
So we
standards.
sound like we have a conclusion?
Yeah,
Right, so the issue on the table is, does somebody have an ability to reallocate it? If not, it stands as it is.
I mean, last year, the original assessment was the parcel 04 and 06 were at 11,378,000. Now 06 is 1,006,500. it makes you feel better, and we could assess the same amount to parcel 4, and then just discount that amount from parcel 2.
Or just go with 22 original, 2022 original.
Well, I wouldn't go with the original because that
No,
is
because it's a higher.
the number of
No.
units.
Yeah,
And they did a correction based
they
on.
downsized in July.
Based on the amended site plan.
All right, Mr. Penaranda, I like where you're going with this. Okay, so you're saying to take the 11,378,500 that's on the 006, the church property?
No, I'm saying to set.
Or, I'm sorry, the 11,378,500 that's on the 004, the gas station.
That was the original assessment, but now the revised assessment is 1,006,500 on 06.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm talking about 04, on the gas.
On the gas, yeah, we could assess the same, 6,500. Same as 06. Gonna reduce a little bit on 02, but at least that puts the numbers a little bit. It's not much. I mean, it's $500,000.
All right, so what do folks want to do?
I mean, if you want to do that, it would reduce 02 to 63,419,600.
And where does that reduction come from?
From 02.
Yeah, that you reduced that by $500,000, and why is that?
And put it on 04 to give it the same assessment as 06.
So the bottom line's still the same,
Oh,
right?
same, yeah.
No, I don't know the gas station.
Right, it's just the allocation, but I'm okay with the revised.
Commercials.
Okay, I guess, why wouldn't we take the proposed of the 65,432,600 and just take the original assessment of 004 at 11,378, slide that over and deduct that from the total?
I agree.
Except for, that's where I had started, except for the assessment from 2021. There really was, this is 04. Yeah, there really was an assessment of over $1 million. I would do exactly what he said, but then plus it up by the same 2021 assessment. So it's minus 11 million plus a little over $1 million. It's a 10 million rounded adjustment. Because the church owns it, but you guys convinced me it doesn't matter who owns it, it's
right.
Site plan,
It's a site plan.
So if you guys put that money on the taxable parcel for the church, you're asking
I'm
a
sorry.
nonprofit to
Excuse me.
pay.
I'm sorry.
tax.
It's just among the board members.
I mean, the gas station's a profit-making enterprise. It's not. So you guys still think, again, is it the site plan rules or the ownership rules?
To me, it's a site plan.
And Mark's,
Site
and Barnes, and Greg? What? Is it the site plan that's most important that drives everything else, or the ownership that drives everything else of the 3 parcels?
Maybe both.
Yeah, but it's under site. I was all about reducing, but it's a site plan.
Here's the issue I see is I'm reading through the 80 different firms that looked at this property and all their comments, and at least half of them are ground lease is an issue. The ground lease is an issue. Can't work under the ground lease. So what if we took the 2022 original at 62 million? We like the way that's allocated a little bit better, and take 10% off for the ground lease issues. Just call it a day. I mean, appraisers will do a % reduction for a ground lease versus fee simple. So they've got to deal with a landlord, and who knows what's in that ground lease. Obviously, it wasn't good enough for 80 people that Newmark brought to this deal. So there's issues there. And then we can keep the allocation as they had it in the original 59,688 would be the total.
And it's all about risk. You just reduce it 10% for the risk.
Related to the ground lease.
lease.
Yeah, we've got a department policy, which is generally based on fee simple purchases. That's where I was trying to get at, where that data come from. And this is a ground lease.
What was the ground lease? What was the ground?
Well, the church air rights.
Oh, it's air rights.
I could vote for it, but I'm concerned about just an arbitrary 10%.
Yeah, I don't think that's something that we should.
Yeah, versus 12% or what, there's,
Yeah.
you're just picking a number.
I'm not picking that. I've seen appraisals use 10 in the district as well.
We certainly see it in residential.
It could be worse.
busy
All right,
streets.
I have another one, and then I think we've got to come up with a consensus and make. What if we took the original assessment and the difference between the original and the proposed is 887,400, and take that off of the Ames Center 002 and leave the allocation from the original?
Well, that just comes to the proposed bottom line. So you're saying, but you're tweaking the allocation a bit.
Yeah, I'm not going with because I don't think it's allocated properly in the proposed. So I would say if the difference between the two columns of the original and the proposed is 887.4, then take that off of the 002 parcel, and you still have the same total of
Just
the
trying
the 65,432,600.
Okay, why don't you make that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to make sure I have enough, otherwise it reverts back to the county
I'm okay
of
with
the
it.
original assessment. So
I'm okay with it.
you're okay with it,
Let's do it.
Mr. Batskin?
Yeah,
Yes?
yes.
All right, then I'm going to move to confirm the revised, or not confirm, I guess I'm going to reduce it to the county's revised number of 65,432,600 with the allocation from the original assessment and the reduction of the 887,400 coming off of parcel ending 002.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
This is the hardest one.
Okay. That is
We'll be back. We'll be back next year.
5-1, and that's without Mr. Hoffman.
We need to get there.
Okay, so Rosa, do you have that?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
Difference.
Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry, the revised number again?
The revised number is the same. It's 65,432,600. We're just taking the
Just the
difference
difference in allocation.
off of parcel 002. All right, thank you. All right, moving on to now case 4 on
Thank
the
you, Tim.
agenda.
Thank you, Grant.
Okay, do we have Mr. Warren? Is he not coming?
I'm here.
Oh, there he is. You finally filled the slot that's been sitting open. Okay, so the next on the agenda is RPC 14041-187 at 3807 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you. I would like to direct the board to page 45 of 116 of the county response memo. This property is the Amelia, located at 816 North Oakland Street. It consists of a single tax RPC. It was initially assessed for 2022 at $43,715,200. The county is recommending a value of $41,944,300, and the requested value that we're requesting from the board today is $37,512,200. This property was originally built in 2009. It's 108 total units, one building, 8 stories. It is a high-rise apartment that offers a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. The 1 bedroom units range in size from 650 to 695 square feet, and the 2 bedroom range from 840 up to 1,060 square feet. I'd like to direct the board now to page 4, or excuse me, page 4 of 116, which is the county's historical income and expense summary sheet, and the main issues that we still have following the revision of the county. It's a theme for all these properties that we'll bring before you over the course of the next month or so with these DITMAR properties, and we discussed them in the hearings last year, is that COVID was not a one-year blip, and that the numbers are trending poorly last year, and now there's evidence of that for all these properties that we'll present to the board this year. You'll see in with regard to the gross potential income, the 3-year trend has been on a downward trend from 3.28 million in 2019, 3.34 million in 2020, and then most recently 3.2 million in 2021. The county's revised gross potential income, it was revised down from roughly 3.5 million to now 3.39 million, 3.4 million, still around $200,000 away from what was actually reported in 2021. And effective gross is, again, a 3-year downward trend from 3.18 million in 2019, 3,072,000 in 2020, and then most recently 3,024,000 in 2021. Gross potential income, we feel that the county has overstated the gross potential income for this property, and again, there is a 3-year downward trend, and it's the same thing with the operating expenses for the 3 years. From 2019, it was reported operating expenses of 26%, 26% again in 2020, and then most recently 30% in 2021. The county's revised operating expenses are still well below what was reported in 2021 at 27.5%, and then down to the net operating income and what was reported. Again, we're showing a 3-year historical trend. COVID was not a 1-year blip, and it's going to be years before all these properties make a slow recovery. But net operating income reported in 2019 was 2.34 million in 2019, 2,265,000 in 2020, and most recently 2.1 million in 2021. The county's revised NOI of 2,224,000 puts it basically right in the middle of the 3-year average. It's right at where 2020 was. However, I think we've then shown this trend, and it's going to be an ongoing theme throughout all these cases, is the most recent operating year should be given the greatest weight when considering the 2022 assessment. The revised assessment value represents a 2% decrease from the final 2021 assessment. However, the actual net operating income that was reported, that represents a 7% decline from 2020 to 2021. So again, all that being said, we're hoping that the board considers and gives the most weight to the most recent calendar year reporting year when giving consideration to the 2022 assessment for this property.
I also want to introduce Greg Rains and Sophie Maurer here. They work for the ownership. I know you all are familiar with them and might have some comments to add on this. But as we heard last year when Greg was telling you, look, things are bad and things are getting worse, the board's response was, well, we need to see it. Well, we're going to show you today and really throughout the cases that we're showing it to you now, and the county is still not accepting it or looking at it. So, Greg, do you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think that was pretty well said. Thank you, Blake and Jeremy, and good to see the board again. Yeah, we had the conversations last year that the start of 21 was still had a little residual from 2020, but that the year was going to get worse as it went forward, and it did. All of our properties were significantly down on income and expenses based on supply chains, and overall costs are higher. So every property we'll see will have a lower income than we've achieved in the past and higher expenses, and that is the norm. That's not a 1 year blip. I mean, we talked about that last year, and it was like, look, we're going to take this year for this year. Well, I would appreciate if we would look at 21 as this year for this year, and moving forward, it's not improving. Well, it improved, but slowly. It's not a 1 year down and then jump right back up.
2018 income is no longer relevant. So 3-year
Okay.
averages don't matter. But that's all we got.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chikas, for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Again, summarized sheet that we're going to be looking at, of course, the board's very familiar with. I believe Blake misspoke a little bit in the idea that the gross potential has not decreased 3 years in a row. In fact, it increased in 2020, the year of COVID, that they claim was the not a 1 year blip. So the income actually went up in COVID. It does look like it went down after 3 years of increases, 18, 19, 20. But if we're looking at the total snapshot, you'll see that the vacancy dropped by almost 4%. It makes very much sense that in order to increase occupancy, they dropped rents and increased concessions, which is exactly what happened. Concessions are up almost 100%. And again, vacancies down 5%. So it looks like what they did, and as Mr. Chitlick and Mr. Warren pointed out, they did with all their properties is they tightened up occupancy by dropping rents. They're not alone. We saw that with most owners. If the idea was that COVID caused a ripple in the vacancy, the way they fill those vacant spots is by lowering your rents. You stay competitive with new properties, you stay competitive with your own. Ditmar, most of the cases we're going to hear today and in the future will be Ditmar properties because they have a lot of them. So they're filling up a lot of these spaces. In this case, they didn't need to modernize or retrofit this property because it's generally relatively new. But again, in looking at the property itself, when we look at the revision, we do agree somewhat with Mr. Chitlick in that 4 years out is, looking back 4 years, we wouldn't place much weight on 2018. But again, the reason why there's 4 years displayed is to show a stable operating history. So knowing that we can see the property, what they're able to achieve, we then look at the rent roll. And if you notice on the rent roll on the revised worksheet, some of the rents that we're actually applying and projecting for January 1, 2022 are lower than what was achieved on the rent roll. Now we do that, as the board has seen, in order to come up with a stabilized effective gross that's in line with what's been achieved over the last 3 years. We did note that, of course, the property tightened up its occupancy, and we do believe that 2022 will be an easier year to increase 1 or 2% rent. Obviously, once you have a captive audience that's in place, it's easier to raise rents than it is to try to get people into this apartment with higher rents. Now that they have them in place, and as you'll note on the summary sheet, property was 98% occupied on January 1 per the rent roll submitted. Once they have them in place, again, it makes much more sense that it's easier to get back to the rents that were achieved in 18, 19, and even in 20. You'll see that the projection made for 2022 is actually a good bit below what was achieved just 2 years ago. We did make adjustments to parking, other, and RUBS. We did note and ask for clarification. We didn't get it in time. But you'll note too the difference in RUBS, which is again the ratio utility billing system, and the utilities that are being listed. Utilities increased from 2018 to 2021, and RUBS did accordingly. What we've asked them to do and make sure that they do in the future is list those two independently. So in other words, the utility should not be an offset of the ratio utility billing system. They're two totally separate things. One is an expense to the owner of utilities. One is an income producing entity whereby they charge the tenants for a reimbursement of those utilities. So they should not be seen as an offset. They should, in fact, be reported correctly. So I did point out that my looks like 2019, 2020's income was a bit low compared to the RUBS that were reported for 2021. Regardless, the board is aware of how we look at these. Again, I was looking at stabilized nature. We did stabilize the effective gross in line with what's going on the last 3 years. In fact, you can see it's a modest 2% increase over what was projected last year, which was again itself a 1.6% decrease. As regards to operating expenses, what they reported for 2021 was higher by almost $100,000, $80,000 than anything they reported the last 4 years. Again, as the board has heard, we don't take 1 year and just slap a cap rate on that. That would be inappropriate. We do smooth that out. Our projection for operating expenses was higher than what was originally projected January 1, higher than years 18, 19, and 20. And again, very much in line with the average of the last 3 years. Same thing with NOI. You'll see the NOI projected is just barely 100,000 over what was produced last year. Again, in a year in which they saw 3% drop in GPI. But based on its historical operating, we do believe that the revised figure is very much in play based on, again, 98% occupancy, rents that are projected to increase based on the rent roll submitted. So we do believe that the revised value of $41,944,300 is appropriate and ask that the board confirm that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Metzgen.
Two quick ones for the appellant. First one is, do the apartment tenants pay their own utilities directly, or maybe some of them?
Greg, can you answer that?
The department tenants pay their own utilities directly to the utility companies. Yeah. This property has water meters that they'll pay us for the charge, and we pay the water bill. But it's a pass through. It's not a. So the water meter, the power is paid directly to the power.
Okay, so row 9 rubs, the only dollars you're getting in as reimbursements is for water sewer.
We have no. It's not a ratio utility billing here. It's just a reimbursement for a sub meter, and then we pay the water bill.
So you pay $100 out, they pay you $100. So it's a direct. Chris mentioned that it wasn't a direct offset; it was income producing, but in fact, it's not.
Right. Oh no, I know it's not profit producing, but I mean there are some reimbursements coming in for utilities. It's water sewer only.
Right. Yes. The assessor, it sounded like, was claiming that it's an income source for them, but it's a true dollar in, dollar out offset. They make no money off of it.
It's normal. Yes.
Okay. So may we counter as well, Mr.
I wanted to ask a question. Go from about under 30,000 to 70,000 for that little figure.
Yeah. So again, I think we're getting the semantics here with the idea of it's not revenue producing. If another apartment, a similar apartment, does not collect that pass-through reimbursement, whatever you want to call it, that's not revenue producing. This is revenue producing. They made $71,809 by collecting that revenue from their tenants.
But if a tenant, if you pay directly, if that other building pays the water company directly, then they're not getting money in, but it's not going out. The Ditmar makes $0
so
on
we're not
that.
arguing whether or not it's an expense. We're arguing whether or not it's revenue producing.
If another property wants to include their utilities, they want to include their utilities as part of the amenity package.
Okay, we got people talking over everybody. So when you recognize,
Madam Chairwoman, the question was, do the tenants pay directly? The answer is no. They pay electric directly. They pay the building, water, and sewer. It's revenue producing.
But then
hold on, no, it's not, because if they paid the water company directly and the water couldn't bill them, we still get the same. It's still zero.
Right, because you wouldn't collect any revenue from that rub.
There's no way that
gentlemen, going back to questions from board members.
My next question is,
you wouldn't collect any revenue.
Retailer on the corner of Wilson and Oakland, do you have a second or third retailer? Or is it just that one?
We just have the one retail tenant.
Okay, just wanted to make sure it wasn't something hidden somewhere. And okay, thank you.
Is there confusion over the rub issue?
I'm sorry. You can address that in your wrap up. Other questions from board members? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure, I guess we'll have to take a minute wrapping up what reimbursements are. Again, this is not a unique thing. Many properties charge their tenants for utilities, whether it's cable, whether it's electric, whether it's water, whether it's sewer, whether it's all of the above. If they do not collect these things, they are not collecting revenue against that expense. You got to keep those totally different. Yes, there is an expense associated with these utilities. They are not under obligation to collect revenue associated with those expenses. If they do, please consider that as a revenue producing entity. It's not an offset of expenses. The expenses will stay the exact same amount. We've established that. Whether or not they collect revenue against that is what we're deciding here. They are absolutely collecting revenue against that. And as I pointed out in the opening, they apparently underreported at years 18, 19, and 20.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up.
If I'll start the wrap up, I don't want to muddy the waters with this point. The fact is that the assessor every year says, we say things are getting worse, and he says, we got to see it. Well, we're now showing it to you, and that's the key. And his response really talked about, but things are indicating that next year it'll be better, which doesn't matter. The electric goes directly to the electric company. If the owner collected the electric bill of $1 million and paid the electric company $1 million, it's the exact same as them paying. What Chris is saying is, yeah, but then you would have $1 million, you could do whatever you want with. It would be just to be paying the electric bill. In this case, the fact is he's overvalued the income this property can produce by $130,000 and using, well, before the pandemic, that's where it was, so we're taking it stabilized. Greg mentioned expenses are up across the board. Income's down, and his point is, yeah, but you only had 2% vacancy. In the income statement on column E, the vacancy was 1.62%. We're not hiding that. If you cap nothing but column E, you're using a 2% vacancy. But Chris doesn't run apartments, Greg does, and they run a lot of them. They run them as very well, and they have a lot of efficiencies in their expenses that they can charge lower numbers than other people can. But the fact is that their decision to use concessions was not just to be nice guys in the community. It was to drive the income to using a vacancy of 1.6%, which is what's being used in column E. So if you cap column E, you're actually staying consistent with where we were last year and equalizing that.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. I'll let other folks start. I will start by saying I actually agree with Mr. Chitlick on a few of his points, but we'll see where folks are and then we'll see. So Mr. Hoffman, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think at the bottom line, the numbers from the county this year are pretty good on this property, 388,000 a unit. I'm just looking at the comps and the guidelines, and almost nothing sells that low. And you're right next to a metro station. You got George Mason across the street. I don't see a downward spiral here.
Well, I guess I would just ask you there, Mr. Hoffman, if you just look at the NOI, we do see a downward trend. I mean, if you just look at, you know.
Well, the test is at 22.2.
2. And actuals were 2.1.
Yeah.
You know, and I know we're only saying, oh, it's 100,000, but it's 100,000 in a year when, in all honesty, we did all sit here last year and say, oh, wait, it's COVID. We got to wait. We got to see it. Well, now they're showing it to us. So we can't just go, oh, well, next year it looks like it's going to be better. So we're going to pop it back up again.
Well, it's 20. I mean, we're below 2019 levels, and rents are probably higher at this point. So, I mean, there's an issue with the cap rate as we sit here today, but at January 1st, I guess you could say, you know, it was still below prime. I mean, right now the prime rate is, you know, so we'll do this again, and maybe next year it's a 7.5 cap, and this thing's going to drop by $10 million on the assessment. But you know, that's the January 1st issue.
Right. I guess I'm just more concerned with the declining NOI. So, Mr. Lawson, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to share this past Saturday at the county board. The board members were talking that at certain locations there's actually bidding wars for rental units, like there was for you know, purchasing homes, and the vacancy rate is really plummeted. And I mean, I myself am okay with the county.
Just keep in mind, we pretend we're at 1122.
I know.
Yeah, that's why
I know. But even then it was residential was doing fine. Even then, is my recollection.
Okay, Mr. Matzkin.
I don't see, if I didn't have anything in front of me, the I&E, I would say, my God, it's gloom and doom. These people are about to go out of business. And there maybe is a somewhat of a, because of COVID and supply chain and all this good stuff. But their numbers show, sure, there is a slight decline, but it's slight. We're talking 1% here and 0.6% there. I was trying to find something to lower the assessment, And I looked at a very small number of rubs, and it went from an average of, I don't know, 25 or 6,000 to 70,000. But when you cap it out, it gets to be real money on the assessment, 700 and something thousand, well over. But then the department says, but the numbers in columns A, B, and C were underreported. And again, it's only water and sewer. And it doesn't matter that it's money in, money out, because it's captured. If it's money in, rubs, and it's money out, operating expenses. It's true, it's not a profit for the appellant. So I'm just looking at the constituents of the EGI, and I said, oh, we should knock 40,000 off rubs, but then I find that the base numbers were underreported, so it's still just a rounding issue. It's nothing dramatic that I can see here. Anybody disagree with it?
No, I'm okay with the revised system.
I'm okay with it.
All right, well then, would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Metzger.
I move that we accept the county's proposed assessment of $41,944,300.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm opposed only because I think it should be lower. Okay, it is the county's revised number of $41,944,300 is confirmed. All right, moving along to the next case on the agenda is RPC 1800311, 1200 North Beach. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Thank you. Direct the board to page 53 of 159 of the county's response memo, which you'll find our summary of facts. This is Cortland Towers. It is consistent of one single tax RPC. It is currently assessed, or originally assessed, at $203,910,500, and the county is recommending a revision down to $184,934,700. The value we are asking for today, based on the most recent 2021 reported income at the property, is $160,242,700. It's an older property, originally built in 1989, 575 total units in the Clarendon Courthouse submarket, and 17 stories high. It's a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and also includes both furnished and unfurnished units. If I direct the board again to the county's mixed use income and expense summary that can be found on page 3 of 159. Again, very similar to the last case, but magnified. And you'll see some of the extreme gaps and how far we are still away. Just going down to the last 3 years of reported NOI, the last stable year in 2019, $11,628,330 was the NOI. And following COVID, it dropped to $9,859,615. And this is another one where we told you at the hearing last year that this is continuing to trend downwards, and reported another basically $1 million below the reported NOI in 2020 of $8,784,272. The effective gross income, as you'll see, the last 3 reported years has dropped off significantly from $15.75 million in 2019 down to $13.6 million in 2020, and most recently $12.6 million in 2021. The county has revised their effective gross income from $15,025,183 initially, and dropped it $1 million to $14,016,309. But we're still almost $1.5 million away from what was actually reported at the subject property in terms of the total revenue. Expenses, again, 26% in 2019. That increased slightly to 27.5% in 2020, and most recently 30.5%. The county, in their revised test column, revised their operating expenses from 25.86% up to 27.9%. Again, the assessors revised NOI for the subject property is down about $1 million. It was $11.1 million initially, and then following our appeal, dropped to $10,105,198. So again, we're still $1.3 million off of what this property actually reported in 2021. The revised assessment represents a 6.5% decrease. However, the actual NOI from 20 to 2021 represents an 11% drop year over year. Again, we're hoping, and as we stated last year, there's been a downward trend in the last 3 years. COVID was not a one-year blip, and so we're hoping the county and the board considers the most recent reported financials and gives it considerable weight in the 2022 assessment.
Hey, Blake, can I join it? Do I have any more time? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. I was going to introduce you. The key
no,
here is
Jeremy, I thought you were off. Go ahead.
Yeah, Blake and I have no idea how to run an apartment building, and I'm going to guess that Chris doesn't know how to run an apartment building either. Greg does, and I think it's really important to understand why the income is what it is, instead of just saying they could do more here or make less there, and why they made the decision. So I think it's important, if you do have questions about why were certain things on the income statement done the way they are, that Greg's here to answer that. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I don't want to hold on to this for all of our hearings, but last year it was pretty clear that we were going to consider this year for this year. We were not going to consider this year last year, knowing that these rents, income were going to be down and expenses were going to be up. And I think last meeting we heard a little, just maybe anecdotal about bidding wars. I mean, there's concessions down the street at new builds. The Highlands is still offering 2 to 3 months free across the street from Portland Towers. That's not a bidding war. And I don't think we can I think we have to look at the actual data here and focus on that versus, things that are maybe that we've heard at a board meeting. This property, the same thing, the expenses are up. Those expenses keep climbing. Next year, which I'm not going to talk about, the expenses will be higher. Income. Whenever you say it's easier to raise rents on someone that came in than it is to bring somebody else new, if we discounted with a 16% concession and a 20% lower asking rent, those folks don't and could not qualify what you're saying as market. One, we're not raising rents that much, and two, it's not that easy just to move up rent because folks can't afford it, right? Like, there's a lot of concession hopping in 2020, a lot. There's a lot of folks that move into a building just because for 1 year they could live there, and they're going to go to the next one, move back to South Arlington, move back out west. For 1 year, they were in an apartment that they could afford for that particular year. So we can't just say we're going to raise the rent on 575 units. No one's going to move out, and we're going to stabilize at 2% vacancy. That doesn't happen. So again, I think we need to look at those numbers because we're down. We said we were going to be down, and it's a bad year, and the expenses are up. And so we cannot say last year, take this year for this year, we'll look at next year, and then when we get to this year, we say we heard at a board meeting that rents, there's a bidding war. There's no bidding wars.
This property was reduced by the board in 19, in 20, and 21, and now they're coming in front of the board with a basically $19 million reduction, which we appreciate, but that still would be accepting income $1.4 million higher than the property achieved. And this came as no surprise to anybody because we told you this was coming last year. When I understand they need the numbers to do it, but now they have the numbers that they won't recognize it is what's become frustrating.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members?
That was, I have not yet spoken then.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr.
I
Chief.
think those are 10 minutes and I numbed you up. So we are talking about Cortland Towers. I find this disingenuous that we talked about the decline in value. Not one thing was mentioned about the fact that this property has been heavily renovated the last 3 years. We can agree, we have to agree on facts, I think, is what this has basically brought us to. This property has been under renovations for 3 years. $20+ million has been spent in capital expenditures over the last 3 years. Last year, 257 units were offline to be renovated. This year, 114 units were offline to be renovated. Now, I did ask the owners through their agency, are we finished with this property's renovations? And we were told that we are. When we looked at last year's mixed-use worksheet compared to this year, we found that, not a surprise, virtually everything that was not modernized as of last year was this year. So in other words, they spent $20+ million over the last 3 years keeping units offline so that they could ask for more money when they became online. You know, Mr. Raines just testified that they're not raising rents much. They're raising rents. They're going to raise rents as much as they can to keep that occupancy where they can live with it, if you will. You know, there's no altruism that I can count where that we're keeping rents at a reasonable rate for those in the metro area. This property is well located. It's metro adjacent. It's well amenitized. Obviously, they've spent a lot of money on not only furnished units, but modernizing the existing units. Regardless, we did look at this again as a stabilized unit. We've had board members talk about, you know, it's essentially speculation on buildings that are empty. I would like the board to try to differentiate between market vacancy and owner mandated vacancy. If you look at page 32, I asked specifically, what percentage of the 18.4% attributable to true vacancy is attributable to renovations? And they responded 14.7%, which I appreciated. That essentially put true vacancy at about 3%. That's market driven. That's competitive driven. So they decided to take 114 units offline and renovate them. That's not a unreasonable ask. They're trying to keep up with the Joneses. Again, I think as was pointed out, this property was built in 1989, so they're modernizing, making it more in line with what the competitors are offering. We did note that, and we also noted that, again, our gross potential is $1.5 million lower than what was achieved last year. So our projection for gross potential is $1.5 million lower than what they achieved last year. And this was a year in which they were 18% vacant, due to 15% of that being owner mandated. Let's not rent these out. Let's improve these, modernize these, furnish these, etc. So when we're looking at our projections, they're way off of what's been achieved over the last 4 years because we're looking at what is a stabilized effective gross. In other words, we are taking into account owner mandated vacancy, even to allow for a stabilized value. So when we put out our projected effective gross, that is in fact looking at what was achieved in years 18, 19, and 20. In regards to operating expenses, Mr. Warren noted the percentage, but not the dollar amount. The operating expense offered, projected by the county is actually some $60,000 higher than what was achieved last year at the property. So again, very much taking into account what's going on at the property, looking at what's been achieved historically, and then making adjustments accordingly. Our our NOI projection is barely over what was achieved in 2020, again, in a year in which owner mandated 22% vacancy. So we're muddying the waters here, but I'm asking the board to separate what is market driven and what is owner mandated. If the owner decides to keep units offline, effectively that's going to lower the achievable gross, right? You're going from a projected gross potential to what they're actually achieving, actuals. So again, I ask you to keep in mind what is actually the projected gross, and you can see that pretty easily. Even in the COVID year, they actually grew their apartment revenue from 18 to 19, and again from 19 to 20. They grew their apartment revenue in the year of COVID. So the fact that it dropped off some 8%, again, I'm going to put more akin to getting bodies into the units and tightening up that vacancy, which again was effectively owner mandated. Given that we did look at this property as a stabilized entity, even though, again, these are self-inflicted vacancies, we do believe that the revision of $184,934,700 should be approved. Confirmed, rather. I would point out, too, that that's a 6.5% drop from last year's $197,886. The appellants are asking for a 20% drop 1 year, 19% drop from 1 year. And that's essentially, you've heard this before, that's why you do not slap a capitalization rate on 1 year. 1 year does not an assessment make. We do believe that the revised value of $184,934,700 should be confirmed. Thank you.
All right, thank you again. All right, questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Metzgen.
I have an easy one for the department. It's been mentioned several times that the appellant's reinvesting in his property. I noticed, and that the property is old and was due for renovation, and they're doing it. but the effective age hasn't changed. Will it change when all the apartments that are due to be upgraded or updated, or do you do it incrementally? Will there be a big
Yeah, no,
difference?
unfortunately, that's an egg on our face, sir. It's just a lack of manpower and visitation. You know, we have some 600 parcels, and as of today, we actually now have a 4th team member. So we've just been, unfortunately, a little bit behind as far as site inspections, updating permits. But you are correct, sir. Yes, please do note that that is an original condition, and they've noted that they've spent some $20 million the last 3 years.
And can we respond to what the renovation is, just so we all are on the same page?
You can in your wrap-up, unless Mr. Matzkin asks that specifically.
No, I'd be happy to hear whatever you choose.
Okay.
Greg, do you want to talk about what this 20 million that Chris is talking about? Is it you're gutting the place?
Oh, no, it's interior unit renovation, so replacing cabinets, counters, and floor.
Appliances, yeah.
Right, but it's not to get an extra $500 a month. It's basically to keep up with the Joneses. Otherwise, there's so many new buildings and there's so many new properties in that area that you just have no choice. This isn't let's do it to get so much more money.
This is a leading question, man.
Okay, I'm sorry. Asked
Issue.
and answered. Mr. Matzkin, do you have another question?
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you'd wrap up, please, and I would ask you to keep the comments professional on both sides, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, we're looking at a property that has been undergoing tumultuous amount of vacancy, but again, I would point out that it's clearly been driven by owner's decision to renovate and modernize. I've not yet seen a property that's not modernized that did not receive a return on investment. So I think the anticipation on our side and the owners is that these properties, units that have been modernized and furnished, will be collecting higher rents than they did previously. Given that we looked at this as a stabilized property and acknowledged, again, full $1.5 million lower gross potential income than what was achieved last year, we do believe that the stabilized value of $184,934,700 should be recognized and confirmed. Again, a 7% drop from last year as opposed to 19% drop as recommended by the appellant. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And gentlemen, I don't know who's going to do the wrap up, but you have 1 minute, please.
As Greg said, the money wasn't spent to make this building much better. It's to stop the bleeding and to stay up and stay competitive. And I think that's important. The speculation that's being done is, okay, now that these buildings have been modernized and much newer and greater, that the income's going to go way up. The fact is the income last year was 9.8 and this year it's 8.7 and the assessor's using 10. We told you all this was coming. This is just like the last case, but much more dramatic in that sense. And expenses are much higher. Expenses are 30% plus. The owner testified that that's where it is now. It's only going higher next year. And the assessor is just basically ignoring columns, really C and E, and focusing more on columns A and B than he is on E, which I think is a miss. This property received a $20 million reduction last year, and then they shot the value kind of back up again. This is being reduced every single year because the assessor just won't accept the fact that the income is the income on this case. And last year when we presented it to you, again, we're told, wait till next year. So next year we'll get the new income and it'll be 2022 and it'll be very similar to the 21 levels, maybe slightly higher. And it'll say, well, this is a 2-year average, or you'll hear how next year is going to be better. It's a little bit frustrating in that sense.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. Where's everybody on this? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start it. I was actually okay with the original assessment. And so I'm definitely okay with the 184 million.
All right, other folks? Mr. Hoffman?
I was just gonna say, I feel the same way. I think the county's reduction is fair.
Mr. Yates?
I'm good with the reduction. I looked up the notes from last year's discussion, and it was all about the renovation. It's about the staging of the renovation, and they're doing it to stay competitive, and they're keeping occupancy up by doing it. And the rents are going to the higher rents of the newer buildings. It's the same discussion. It's just they're trying to present it a little different. I'm good with the numbers. And at some point, I've heard some statement that they're done the renovations now. So we'll see, but these numbers are good.
All right, anybody else?
I'm good with the revised assessment.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to 184,934,700.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's revised number of 184,934,700. All right, going to case 6 on the agenda. S4 is RPC 0505203A at 2110 North Monroe Street. Mr. Warren, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you. I'd like to direct the board to page 71 of 178, which is our summary of facts. This is the Cherry Hill Apartments. It is consistent of 3 tax RPCs. The 2022 assessment originally was $50,490,800. The county is recommending a revised value of $47,359,700, and we are requesting a value from the board today of $40,921,400. This property was originally built in 2019. It's 93 total units and what we classify as a garden-style apartment. And it's been one of the contentions over the last few years. The county classifies this as a mid-rise. It's 4 stories. And as I direct you to now page 4 of 178 is the county's historical apartment income and expense summary. Going back 4 years, there was no income in 2018. And 2019 was a lease-up year. The 2022 assessment, the revised assessment, is represents a 5.4% decrease from the prior year's 2021 value. However, actual NOI year over year from 2020 to 2021 decreased 9.5%. Similar to the previous 2 cases we've discussed, we feel that the county has overestimated the gross potential income in comparison to the most recent reporting year, and there's been a downward trend since the property was most recently stabilized in 2020. $3.75 million in 2020, down to $3,556,000 in 2021. The county's revised GPI brought it down originally from 3.85 million to 3.75 million, which is right what was basically what was reported in 2020. The effective gross income also on a downward trend from 2020, 3.55 million in 2020 down to 3.36 million in 2021. The county's revised effective gross income is $3,455,000. So approximately $100,000 above what was actually reported in 2021. Operating expenses were at 23% in 2020, increased to 26.5%, and the county did revise their operating expenses up from 23 to 26%. The difference in the cap rate for a garden style in comparison to a mid-rise is essentially 50 basis points. Which is the difference in the cap rate that we're using, 5.9% in comparison to the county's 5.4%. Looking at the assessor's NOI compared to 2020, the NOI reported was 2.7 million. That dropped to 2,468,573 in 2021. The assessor's revised NOI again is approximately $100,000 above what was actually reported in 2021. And we would ask the board to give consideration and a greater weight to the income that was most recently reported in the 2021 calendar year. I don't know if Jeremy's with us anymore, but Greg, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add on this one as well.
Not much, like other than this property's majority 2 and 3 bedroom units, and those units in COVID really did take more of a hit than our normal units, and also were a little harder to fill. So I just for what that's worth, those units are, that property has a different level of stress based on the type of units.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chikas for the county.
Yes, ma'am. Again, fairly well summarized by Mr. Warren. I mean, I wouldn't count any trends at this property, basically 2 operating years. And again, at least I think we have a difference in opinion of what's going on at the property. Much like the other 2, I should say, at least the first 2, the property seems to have dropped its rents to again increase its occupancy. Even if at this point it was essentially about 1%, 1.5%. You saw this again with concessions. Concessions go up, some of the other income tends to go down. Either parking fees get waived or minimized, maybe a 3 months rent on a 2 free months rent on 14-month lease, whatever. But again, concessions burn off, and they serve a purpose. They're there to entice occupancy. It worked. They're down at just over north of 1% occupancy. So you can see the brunt of the vacancy and concession is concession. We contend that will burn off. When we go down the line and we look at operating expenses, we're actually offering a higher projected amount than what was achieved at the property last year, modestly, but still. Again, I think that speaks for the idea that there probably will be some movement on a property that's only had 2 full years of occupancy. Given that it's essentially 98% occupied or so, and it shows a 97% occupied as of the 1/1/2022 rent roll, we do believe that our operating expense is spot on. We do believe, again, there will be an increase, slightly less than 2% or so expectation for the rents. Again, not only is this advertised as a mid-rise, it's advertised as a luxury mid-rise. And its amenities that fit that. Yoga studios, TRX amenities, fitness spaces, electric parking, yoga studios, etc. As far as, again, RUBS, those have increased year over year over year. A similar issue, we're not going to get into it now, but a similar issue is what we pointed out earlier, making sure that those RUBS are, again, reported in full, and again, with regards to the full amount of utilities to be reported in full as well. Given that, again, we're looking at rents based off of the rent roll submitted, very modest increase applied to those, adjustments made to parking, adjustments made to other and RUBS, and again, an increase in operating expense projection over what was achieved at the property. We do believe that the county's NOI is more in play with what is going to be achieved at the property in 2022. Therefore, we do believe that the revised value of $47,359,700 should be confirmed. As we've done in previous cases, I will point out too, this is a reduction of about 5.5% from last year's value, which again is much more in play with what was reported in 2021 versus the appellant's requested reduction of almost 19%, 18.3%. So we do believe that the county's revised value of $47,359,700 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? All right, Mr. Chikas, anything else you need to tell us about this property?
Again, just to keep in mind, you know, what we did as far as the adjustments made. We do believe that this is more in line with what will be achieved January 1, 2022. Again, a reflection of a 5% drop from last year, much more in reason as opposed to the 18% adjusted suggested by the appellant. So we do believe that $47,359,700 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Warren, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
So, yeah, just to reiterate quickly what Chris just said, this property is a newer property. It's only had 2 full calendar years of operations. And because of that, I think you need to really consider the most recent reporting year when giving consideration to the 2022 assessment for the 2021 reported financials. Regarding the classification issue, I'd just like to bring up again, this is an issue that we've brought with Ditmar's similar properties that are of this ilk, Birchwood, Henderson Park, Thomas Place, Thomas Court. And in prior years, the board has ruled in favor of classifying this type apartment as a low-rise or garden-style apartment, and subject to the county's guidelines for assessment of the vacancy and cap rate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. It's just among the board members. Where's everybody on this? Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off. I want to talk about the garden versus mid-rise. And I think it was 4 years ago, we did in fact change some from mid-rise to garden. But the discussion that revolved around that dealt with 4-story units that had stairs only and not elevators. And I was one of those that felt like it should be classified as garden, but I did not prevail in that opinion, and so I've got to go with the decision that's been made already. Again, I look at this and I look at what happened in 20, I look at what happened in 21, and then, I was actually okay with the original assessment. And I think that going to the $47,359,000 is perhaps being a little too kind to the property owner. And so I think, I'm at the $47,359,700. I'm okay with the county again.
Okay. Other folks? Oh, Mr. Matzkin, I'm sorry. I can't see your hand. You're pushed back.
I got a yellow hand, yellow shirt. I'll do this quickly. I didn't do it on the last case, but I feel I owe it to myself just to go down the bullets. Operating expenses, the department set them up a tiny bit. The overall assessment is down 5.5%, almost 5.5%. The last one was 6.5%, which I think is the highest we've ever seen. This might be the second or third highest reduction that we've seen in departments. Which speaks directly to the appellant's case that we are weakening. Well, 5% I consider weakening. In offices, we're seeing 1% and 2% in some cases, which I think are weakening a lot more. The appellant in their pro forma didn't include RUBS. It's a small number, but we all know that the money comes in, the money goes out. And again, it is offset by an increased operating expenses in the revision over what they achieved in 2021. Also that the department increased significantly the vacancy allowance. Deducted it from the GPI to make a lower EGI than they could have. And therefore, I just can't imagine, I have no problem whatsoever with the revised number. I think it's exactly reminiscent or reflective of the appellant's case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. Of the three, this gives me the least angst. So anybody else? No? All right, somebody like to make a motion? All right, Mr. Matzkin.
I move that we accept the department's proposed assessment of $47,359,700.
All right, I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's revised number of $47,359,700 is confirmed. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, I know we have Ms. Ross on. Do we need to take a break? Mr. Lawson.
Yes, ma'am. And also, Mary, I had informed you about a conflict.
Yep, I'm going to get to that.
I know, but I also
Thank you all.
On the next case.
Okay, on both of them?
Conflict on 2, yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, that's noted. Do we need to take a break or can we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we have Ms. Ross. We will not have Mr. Lawson on either of these cases.
Brothers.
So the next case on the agenda to discuss is RPC 15004-034, 2001 North Adams Street. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Okay, we're starting with that one. Sorry about that. I thought it was the Shawnee that we were starting with. This is Potomac Towers. The county did. I would like to thank Chris for considering what we provided. He did reduce the property on review from 118 million to 116 million. However, the owners felt that there was still some relief that they needed. If you turn to page 44 of the BOE memo, you could see our side-by-side analysis. Let me just pull that up. I had the other property up. I apologize. Our gross potential is actually the actual gross potential of 8.7 million. We have other income of 917,000. We used the 8% cap rate, and the vacancy was, the expenses were kind of high at 3.2 million. So our estimate of value is 102,144,400. One thing I did want to mention is that this building and the next building, they're really old buildings, so they have plaster walls instead of drywall. So often the owners put it down as renovation, but what it really is when they're doing a turnover for a new tenant, sometimes they go in and the number fluctuates. Sometimes the walls are really destroyed, so they have to renovate them in order to get a new tenant in, which is the same case with the next property.
That's why I left it.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Ms. Ross.
Good morning, Chris.
So, it's essentially, this one, I'll try to be very brief. It's essentially just a difference in opinion as far as that last item Ms. Ross noted, which was the renovation cost that we inquired about. As you see highlighted for maintenance and repair, obviously it shot up 268% year over year. That was alarming. We looked into it and did find that approximately $820,635 of that was attributable to renovation expense. One thing I would note, you'll see on there, this property just entered the partial rehab exemption program, whereby it went through a multi-year renovation, some $25 million, $30 million spent on upgrades throughout the building. So, that is a expense that would be considered to the owner, again, a capital expense as opposed to an annual repair and or maintenance of existing features of the property. As you can see in column F, we did do reconstruction of the submitted I&E. It's essentially identical except for that removal of that $820,000. As you can see, once you do remove that, NOI jumps by almost $800,000. Again, much more in line with where we were in our initial projection. And again, much higher than where they achieved in years 2020 and 2019. Given that we did look at that as a stabilized nature, we did do a revision as seen and offered in column G. Again, expenses very much on par with what's been achieved. Again, if you look at reconstruction, it's actually essentially in line with the highest amount that they've spent the last 4 years. And again, given 2022 was a year of renovation, so the expenses went down a bit. Given that we did look at this again as a stabilized property, we do exclude capital expenditures as the board has seen on other cases. We do believe that column F is more representative of what actually occurred at the property in 2021. Given that revised NOI, we do believe that our revision in column G is most appropriate. We ask that you revise the value to $160,589,500, which after the exemption, rehab exemption amount would come to $76,225.03. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Any questions from board members? Mr. Metzgen.
Mr. Chikas, this is for Mr. Chikas, and you might have addressed this and I missed it. operating expenses, bottom line operating expenses, in the appellant's pro forma for 2022, they put in a number the same as what they achieved in 2021, whereas your revision is much lower than that. Did that have to do with the upgrades and the capital expenses and all this kind of stuff?
Yes, sir. Yeah, specifically due to item noted as renovation expense of $820,635. So again, we related to and included in the packet in pages 22 is the response we received from the owner. And then we went ahead and included in pages 24 and 25 the scope of work and renovations that were outlaid by the owner when they went through the renovation. So yes, more distinctly, the number that you see is excluding that capital expense that the county consents.
That's the only real big difference. I want to pin that down. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, ma'am. Again, this board has historically seen we do not consider capital expenditures as an annual repair or maintenance cost. Therefore, we do a reconstruction of the received forms from the ownership. In this case, you see that reflected in the reconstruction column F. Once reconstructed, you see the NOI jumps by almost 800,000. Again, very much in play with the revision that we made in column G. We do believe that considering we do not allow for the consideration of capital expenditures, that column F should be considered more appropriately, thereby making the revision in column G something that we would recommend. We do believe that the value of $116,589,500 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, I just wanted to add that these costs aren't really capital expenditures, they're turnover costs because they can't rent the unit without replacing the plaster. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. Where's everybody on this one?
I'm okay with the revised assessment.
Okay, so am I. I can't see Mr. Matskin. He's too far away from the table. Are you, any comments or you're okay?
In the middle. No, I was just going to say the cost of filling holes in drywall and versus plaster is pretty much the same. I'm not considering that. I'm going with the department's defense of lowering the operating expenses.
Okay. All right. Would somebody like to make a motion then?
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to $160,589,500, and then of course the extension will come in.
Okay, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. It's reduced to the county's revised number of $116,589,500 before the exemption. And thank you, Mr. Chikas. And then do we have
Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Thank you.
Roskin? There we go. Okay, and the final case on the agenda is RPC 25001022, 700 South Courthouse Road. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Okay, this is Shawnee Apartments. It's a mid-rise apartment with 85 units. It's also an old building. It was built in 1961. If you go to page 42 of the BOE memo, you can see our side-by-side analysis. We utilize the actual income generated by the property. The vacancy agrees with the county. Expenses are also the actuals. I did want to mention that the NOI has actually gone down 31% year over year. And our other, I also wanted to mention again, I did mention it earlier, that this also is plaster walls, and it's not really fixing holes in the plaster. It's more that what he explained to me was there's leaks, and so they have to take the whole wall down. He said that there was like drywall damage and plaster repairs around the convectors, and I don't believe that would be something that would be a capital expense. It's something that they need to do to turn the property, to re-rent the property. And that's all I have. I won't keep you very long.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you.
Lord.
I just wanted to let you know that when you review both the columns D and F, take a look at their reported. I'm sorry. Take a look at their reported vacancy versus what what we're using for column D, which is the original assessment. We were actually given a little bit extra vacancy. So basically, the big issue here with this property is the expenses. And as you noticed in the comments below, I made note that both for the years 2020 and 2021, they're reporting renovations in the annual expenses, which we do not consider that. So I wanted to, and because they're not including a 2018, they did not submit an INE for 2018. I went back so far as to 2017 to see what is reasonable. And 2017 is actually very much in line with 2019. So you go, well, that's not COVID. So take a look at the rent that was generated for 2020. Yes, it went down. But for 2021, the rent went back up again. It's going back up again, close to what was 2019. And it's probably due to all these renovations. So my column F was simply a test. We believe that the the original assessment of 16,512,100 is is a good representation of the subject property as it stands based on the 2021 INE. Chris, did you want to add anything?
I did, yeah. Just to reiterate, the biggest issue here is similar to the last one in that we consider those costs that Ms. Roskin detailed in the comments as capital expenditures. Ms. Roskin did inquire with the ownership and received an email confirming that on page, looks like 21 of 72, where $338,909 of expenses listed as renovation. It's not to besmirch the owners. I think we mentioned in years previous, we actually met with them in anticipation of their joining the county's rehab exemption program for rehabilitation of properties. They did not officially enter, but it does appear, at least the conjecture on the county's part, it does appear that they're essentially doing those renovations anyways, again, to better their property and the age in which it sits. I would also point out to the board members, Ms. Roskin went through a rent roll analysis on pages 5 and 6, and you can see she very, very modestly adjusted those up. Rents increased from what was achieved by $5, $6 for efficiencies. It looks like $6 for one bedroom. So this isn't even 1% increase. It's not a 2% increase. We're talking about a couple of dollars. So I think it's a safe bet, again, as we've seen in previous cases, 2022 is a bit more robust market. So there was an anticipation that rents would increase, and again, much more than $5 or $6 per unit. Given that we did acknowledge, we probably could have better represented the reconstructions by taking out those renovations, the capital expenditures from columns C and E. We'd ask you to do that math with us, but you can see in Ms. Roskin's test that essentially that's about where the reasonable amount of operating expenses would be, minus those capital expense renovations listed in the comments. That being said, we do believe that that essentially confirms the assessment as fair and equitable in column D, and we ask you to confirm the $16,512,100. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? All right, Ms. Roskin, did you have anything else?
I just wanted to reiterate that we don't consider those renovations in as an annual expense. And as I said, I went back a little further just to see what would be a typical annual expense. And the 2017 was in line with the 2019, and that the 2020 and 21 includes renovation expenses in what's being reported. And so we feel that column D, the original assessment, is very reasonable and equitable, especially with what's being reported in column E. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
The difference between the amounts for the fixing the plaster is a lot smaller for this property. The difference was $338,921 and $228,000 in 2020. I would just again ask that the board consider the actual performance of the property. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Where are folks on this? Mr. Metzgen.
Up until a couple of seconds ago, I was perfectly fine with all of the above that the department came up with. But it occurs to me, a building this old, they're going to have real plaster problems, for sure. Cracks and forgetting about water intrusion, that just happens. But I guess leaky pipes, pinhole, is going to create mud and ugliness. And I would, and maybe I feel uncomfortable about this, but I would increase, and this is all about operating expenses. Everything else, everybody agrees, I think. But I would increase the operating expenses in column F by some reasonable but define it scientific amount of $100,000, and then cap that out and reduce it. What do you think about that? Again, they're going to have plaster problems, and in Potomac Towers too. Maybe had the appellant brought that up, I might have come up with the same conclusion. It is more than just picture nails for pictures.
Nail holes, right?
Nail holes. Thank you. Big. I'm not good at phrases. Only words. And I haven't done what the cap's 100,000, but that seems for a building this age, there is going to be a lot of that going on. I own a house that has plaster walls. I'm talking personal experience.
Okay, what's up? People think about that. Mr. Hoffman.
I was kind of thinking the same thing, that if anything's going to really hurt this property, it's going to be operating expenses. And it's worse when it's under 100 units because, it's like, how do you get somebody to work there part-time? Like management, you end up paying a higher percentage of income versus a 300 unit building where you've got full-time maintenance crew. Yeah. So I'm not sure what the right number is. That's really kind of the issue right now, but I agree with the concept.
I would add one thing that on the other hand, but it doesn't negate my position, that 63% operating expense isn't sustainable over time. 63% of income. I mean, that's a very bad business model. So it couldn't possibly go anywhere, in my judgment, nearly that high. But a building this age, the 42%, is movable a little bit based on the fact that plaster does deteriorate.
They talk about, sorry, they
Go ahead,
talk about the walls, fixing the plumbing, things like that. I mean, that's more than just patching plaster. That, hopefully, pipe's not going to leak again. That's it. That's going in and redoing things. So there's a mix between it. I understand what you're saying about repairs, but some of this is they've got to redo to keep the place operating.
But doesn't that go as capital improvements instead of?
Yeah, exactly. To improvements versus renovation.
But it shouldn't be as expensive. Because the expenses here is a yearly thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going back, this value is going back to 2019 level. So I don't know, I'm okay with it.
As it is. Yeah. So you're saying the deterioration of the walls is a capital improvement expense, just as obsolescence of kitchen appliances, as an example?
Yeah, I don't think it's an annual thing that is going to be, because the expenses here is something that is considered as an annual expense, an average expense that they're going through year after year. But, changing plumbing and changing bigger items commits capital improvement.
Yes. And are they going in and just simply, are they, even the plaster repairs, is that something they're gonna go into that same unit next year or the following year and redo again as a repair? To me, it sounds like they are doing more than just simply preparing to rebrand.
What was Greg saying, having dealt with plaster in his life? Do you agree with that? It's a capital expense and not a.
In apartments, it's really what happened. Filling in picture holes, things
Well,
like that, or are we talking about
Yeah, a guy punching a
ceiling
wall.
falls down, you gotta replace the whole thing, or you gotta update wiring, you gotta open up an entire wall.
But that's an improvement.
It should be a capital expense, yeah.
Shows what I know.
I'm
All right. All right, then, would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we confirm the assessment of 16,512,100.
A second, Mr. Matskin, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's 4-1 without Mr. Hoffman. The county's confirmed at 16,512,100. Okay, that completes the agenda. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the board's time. And Lori, I sure hope you feel better.
Take care.
Yeah. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, does anybody else have any other business? No? All right, then we will stand adjourned at 11:12 and re-adjourn tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thanks, everybody.
Hey.
I would have just taken the 19 because that's escalated them up a little bit higher. 800,000.
Are we off, Rosa?